It just clocked over to 4:01. So welcome everybody. I'm so glad you're here. I see familiar faces and I see new people I've not met. So that's so great to see a good group. And I know I have a couple people who told me they were going to join late, and I told them just join in because we're going to keep talking. I'll just introduce myself. I'll start there, and then we'll go around. We have a small enough group so everybody can take a moment and share a little bit about yourself. And then we'll dive into the topic. So my name is Cindy Cohen. For those of you who I have not met, so glad to see you're here. I'm a career and business coach, and this series of events, I'm doing one every month, focused on a different professional superpower. And this month we're talking about listening. Last month we talked about creativity. Next month, I think we're talking about focus. And I've just picked these things that I want to focus on for myself as well as my clients, and things we can think about how we can develop that skill, be better at it. None of us are perfect and great at anything, and just, finding the ways to navigate it. And as a group, I learned so much. I interviewed a couple of you for those interviews that I did earlier in the month. I learned so much just talking to other folks about the topic, and also sharing our pains and struggles and what happens. So I'm so glad we get a chance to talk about that. And that's what we're doing. So with that, I'm just going to go around the room. Just tell me your name, tell us all where you're coming from, what maybe the humidity and weather is like there. You can share just a bit about your business, but we're really not about that. I mean, I do want to know what folks are doing. It helps a little to know where your frame is. So let's just start. I'll start with JR because he's on the left there, and I'm going around the room. So go ahead, JR, tell us about that.
Yep. Appreciate, getting to go around with you gals again. This will be fun. I'm J.R. Chappell. I'm the Director of Retirement Planning for Ensign Partners here in Phoenix area. So we specialize in mostly small business owners, but also families and individuals with investment management, retirement planning, anything that entails, employee benefits, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, JR. And it's hot there too, we learned. All right, Jesse, your turn. Where are you coming from and what's that?
So my name is Jesse Jackson. I look different than I do on TV. I am the director of the contact center for dispatch for a company called CoachNet. We are located here in the DFW area, and we offer roadside assistance in the RV industry. So the summer is our busy time. I don't know if you guys have heard this, but there is a pandemic, and that it is one of the safest ways to travel is to rent an RV or to buy an RV. So our business has exploded. So we're 24/7 offering roadside assistance. And it is hot in Dallas, but we moved into a new office here in Grapevine, Texas, and the air conditioning is stuck on 66. So and there is a huge air conditioner vent in my office. So I have a hoodie that I've never been cold, and I'm doing that. So that's the weather here, and I'm thrilled to be here.
Thanks, Jesse. That's craziness. A hoodie in this weather. All right, we'll go to April next. April Steinberg, is that right?
That's right. Yes, I'm April Steinberg. I live in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm a skincare consultant. I own my own business, work for dermatologists. We're all online. So I help people to financially build a business to help themselves or their confidence in their skin. I have 2 little boys, a husband, and life is good over here. I mean, we are very close to the beach, so we might be sweating, but it's nice to hop in that ocean right now.
There we go. Fantastic. I'm going to skip to the other April because that's as I go around. Go ahead, April.
Yeah, my name is April, and I lead small photography tours and women's tours. The next tour I have is coming up to New England, so I can think about cool weather. And I'm joining from the Vegas area, where today it's less than 100 degrees. We've been breaking 115, I think, for a week. So I'm just really happy to hear all the different tips and tricks from all you wonderful people. So thanks.
Thanks, April. And Andrea.
Hi, everybody. I'm Andrea. I'm in Kansas City, Missouri, and it is usually blazing hot and humid this time of year. It's just randomly like 68 degrees today.
Oh, we're all jealous.
Oh.
I know. I don't even know what to do with myself. I have on long sleeves. I was freezing this morning. So I own a digital marketing agency and we offer virtual assistant services as well. So that's what I do. I have 3 daughters, 2 teenagers and a toddler. So we have all kinds of craziness in our house at any given time. So yeah, that's what I do. And I'm just happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. That sounds
Thanks.
great. And we're all jealous of your weather, so embrace it and enjoy it.
I know.
We all
I'm
wish
sure
we
it won't
could.
last long.
Yeah. Okay, let's do Michael next. Hi, Michael.
Hi, everybody. My name is Michael Hurst, and I'm a producer and a host of a podcast called One More Thing Before You Go. I tell unique, honest conversations about what makes us laugh, cry, life after death, grieving, the process, getting to say what you didn't get to say before someone, losing somebody. We have conversations about life, basically. So I love listening and I love talking about it. And I talk about triumph over tragedy stories and how people can move their life forward in a very positive way.
Fantastic, Michael.
Oh.
You're perfect for here. Yeah.
I live in Peoria, North Peoria, Arizona, actually. And I know maybe down in Phoenix, I can't remember the other guy that was down in Phoenix, but up here it's about ready to rain and we're hoping for it.
Oh, we're jealous. If it rains, let us know so we can all live through that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm happy to be here. Thank you to April for inviting me.
Of
Thanks.
course.
Okay, we have Carla.
Hi, so I am all the way in Canada and I just had to Google what all your temperatures were. In Celsius. So it's really hot over here. We're 83 Fahrenheit right now. I just had to Google what that was and I'm waiting on a thunderstorm. So we'll see.
Okay.
My internet will hopefully hold out. But yeah, so I am the owner of Early Learning Foundations. I'm an early childhood educator and I do everything from tutoring children from kindergarten to grade 10 to a podcast and workshops for early childhood educators. So, and I'm so glad that April reached out to me because this is a fun way to spend a Thursday night.
Yeah, it is. Thanks, Carla. And I see Alice joined and I know she's coming from far away. I don't know if she wants to introduce herself if you're there or you just want to listen, Alice.
Can you hear us, Alice?
Mute.
I know she's joining us from Kenya, so let's.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's totally fine, Alice. If you unmute and want to talk, just kind of interrupt us. We'd love to have you introduce yourself if you have a moment. But if you just want to listen today, that's fantastic. Also, it's a great group of people. Oh, there she is. Hi, Alice.
Hi.
Hi.
I just woke up like a few minutes ago. It's 2 a.m. over here. So I'm Alice. I'm in Kenya. I'm a copy editor and proofreader. My strength is in nonfiction material, and I'm glad April reached out to me. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Alice. Wonderful. Thanks for introducing yourself, and thanks for being awake at this crazy hour over there. Appreciate that. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly share a couple of things. I like to do that at the beginning. I mean, we all know that listening is really important, but I have a few. Let me just mute Alice. There she goes, because she's got some noise. And just a few topics or things to share, and then we'll dive into talking amongst ourselves and sharing some ideas. So one of the things that I have done with these superpowers that I picked, I looked at different books that we can resource, and I'll send you guys all a list of the books that we share later today. But the one book that I wanted to talk about is this book called Power of Listening by Bernard Ferrari. And he really dives in what it means to be a listener in business and how that impacts your ability to be successful. And this was his quote, and it's really long, but I'm going to share it anyway because I think it hits what we're trying to talk about, which is listening can well be the difference between profit and loss, between success and failure, between a long career and a short one. Listening is the only way to find out what you don't know and marks the path to making good decisions, arriving at the best ideas. If you aspire to be better at your job, no matter what it is, listening is the most powerful tool at your disposal. I do absolutely believe that everything we can do about listening in business is going to help. And I'll show this next slide. And this is what I found was interesting. So Forbes Nonprofit Council cited 13 qualities of leaders, and number 5 on that was listening. But one of the things I noticed when I looked at this, and then of course, after talking to the folks that I interviewed last week and the week before, I realized that half of these things have to do with listening. You can't be adaptable. You can't be accessible. You can't have empathy. Like all of these other things are really like honing in on listening. Either you have to have empathy to be a good listener, you have to make yourself accessible to be a listener. So many of them all still dovetail right into that, that aspect of our skill set. So knowing that these are the things that we need to do and listen, I wanted to sort of talk about a little bit about what we can do to build our skill there. And this was just a list that I had found of the things that we know that happen when we start to listen. It strengthens our relationships. In some of the interviews that I had last week and the week before, it was interesting to hear how I asked some questions and I got answers both professionally and personally. And one of the really important things that happens when you listen is you share this sort of trust and respect with that person. And it says here, builds trust. That creates that relationship, and less, pausing and letting the other person talk, letting them know that they're heard. It's the only way to sort of build that relationship. And obviously, if those two things, trust and relationships, are being built, you're going to have better teamwork. You're going to enhance your own personal credibility. There's something about that. People are loyal. And it shows your employees and even your customers that you care. I know one of the things that I heard over and over when I was talking to the folks last week was it makes you feel valued when somebody hears you. You feel like you're important enough. And that's something that it's hard to do. We all have things to say. So it is extremely hard for me. I'm a talker, to pause and listen. So I have to practice that quite often when I'm dealing with both my clients and customers and coworkers. I really have to teach myself to stop and listen, because that's really the only time I learn anything, the only time I get to, develop that. So that I have a couple more, but I'll share those later. I'm going to stop sharing and just kind of start with talking about what are some of the things that we currently are doing, or things that you do to make sure that you're listening. And to kickstart that comment or that question, I'll tell you one of the things that I've learned that I have to do, and it's not rocket science or anything, but I have to walk away from my computer. So I coach clients, and 90% of my coaching is over the phone. And lots of times I find myself sitting at my computer talking to a client. And if I do that, I'm not listening. So I pick up my phone. Sometimes I put my headset on. I go sit on the patio, go sit in the other room. I walk away from those distractions. It's really the only way that I can be sure that I'm giving the person I'm talking to 100% of my attention. And it's something that I have to practice. It's not something I'm necessarily good at. I find lots of times I'm having conversations with people while I'm sitting at the computer. And I know if I do that, I'm not doing the best I can. So I'll just pause. We're going to make this an interactive discussion and just see if anybody has any other tactics that they use. I know Jesse and I talked about some of these, so I'm going to call it him first. What you do to make sure you're listening. How do you kind of pause to kind of correct yourself? Because it's hard, even for me, everybody.
Yeah, as we talked about, I've recently returned back to work. I had some medical issues, and so I was off work for about 5-6 weeks actually. And then before that I was working remotely, and my boss said, the biggest thing I need you to work on is employee morale. We're so busy in the summer. So we're having one-on-one meetings with agents, and I'm meeting with them, and about half our workforce is remote. So I'm having to try to connect via Zoom, as we're doing now. And, the joke is, once you learn how to fake sincerity, the rest is downhill. And the reality is you have to know, you need to care and want to listen to the employees, and whether this is and I'm specifically talking as a leader of a contact center. Most of my people are entry-level positions, and I go into the meetings with an open mind. I have a few things I know I want to cover, but I honestly, what do you want to talk about? What do you want to do? And I listen to that and drives the conversation. I think podcasting has helped because I do an interview podcast, but I think that is the key, is to be, and I know it sounds simple, but to honestly care about what the other person is saying.
Yeah, I completely agree, Jesse. I've had people ask me that question before when I was teaching other leadership, like how do you get your, what is they, somebody, how do you get your employees to think that you care? And I said, you just have to care. I don't have a secret sauce for that. If you don't care, they're gonna sniff that out in a minute, right? And
they truly will.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So that is for sure. Did anybody else have anything? Michael, I think you were going to say something. Do you have something to share?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, it's easy for me as a podcaster to engage a conversation because the majority of people that I engage with, I've actually invited onto the program and I'm interested in develop the topic. So from that perspective, it allows me the benefit of not having to, elicit more than what the conversation entails. But there are a few times that I do have a situation where the conversation is not presenting itself the way it's supposed to be, and it just gets a little monotonous or gets a little boring. Or if I've brought somebody on that, although I've had, for example, I'll say a coach. Okay, I brought coaches onto my program before from different perspectives: how to overcome grief, how to overcome addiction, how to overcome molestation, sexual molestation, things like this. But I found that if I was bringing more people on in the same, and I had 2 or 3 of them, it started to get a little monotonous. And the monotony got me fixated on not necessarily paying attention to the conversation as closely, because I found that it was the same material that was being said. So I had the benefit of I'm a retired police sergeant, and I was an investigator for quite some time. So I had experience with interrogating as well as interviewing, and in understanding the methodologies for engaging an individual and engaging the conversation. I have to reset myself in order to re-engage the conversation, whether it be through inciting, this is not going in the direction, in this kind of a direction. Can we talk about this instead? So it would change the course of how the conversation goes into something that we both can get excited about or engaged again from that perspective.
Yeah, I like that, Michael. I know, I think it was Linda who I interviewed 2 weeks ago. She talked a lot about asking questions. And I think that's what finding the right question to ask is what you're sharing here. And
exactly.
Probing.
Yeah, it's kind of, and do something that ignites their passion.
Right.
So when you're talking to somebody and they start getting a little mundane, even because a lot of these guys go on podcast and they go on podcast and they go on podcast. So coming into my podcast, they get into the same routine with their just repeating the same thing, and they're doing it like this and monotonous and It's like I said the same thing in the last 4 podcasts. So I say, okay, tell me something different let's talk about what motivated you to make your coaching business this way. Why did you get involved in your coaching business? Was it a personal experience? Was it an experience from another relative? Was it somebody, tell me what brought you to this particular point. And it kind of re-engages the conversation when I do it that way.
Yeah, I think that's very important. Yeah. Anybody else have ideas on how we can be better listeners? What you focus, April? There you go.
So I like to take notes while people are listening. I know that, like, for all of you, for example, I have 2 pages already. It keeps me kind of engaged and connected, especially when I don't know who you are. It kind of brings me back to, okay, I have a little information here about you. Now I'm really more interested in you, but it keeps my mind focused on the things that you're saying because I'm looking for more that I can kind of jot down. Something simple, maybe it's a 1-worder, but it just kind of helps me feel that connection better with you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually a discipline that I had when I was, in classes, when I was in school. I would take notes to listen because if I'm actively engaged. So I do that still with meetings, and mine look more like doodles. So
exactly.
But it helps me. It helps me stay. You're right. It helps me, like I'm trying to actively write something down and I'm trying to listen. It does. That's a great suggestion, JR.
Well, yeah, and you know, actually, to kudos to April, because that also shows professionalism in a lot of respects.
Yeah.
It's a lot more well professional, and it's going to be a better outcome for everyone if, especially at the start of the meeting, at the start of the visit, if you tell the other person, I am going to take notes while we talk, because you know what looks better, you and I are talking and I'm jotting notes down to keep my thoughts organized and to get all the information down, or not write anything down and then I have to ask you the same question 3 different times, or I try to repeat something back to you and it's 180 degrees what you told me originally, because I wasn't jotting it down, or you know, nobody can retain everything that's said in a conversation, and it's foolish to try. So April knocked it out of the park. I try to do the same thing when I'm meeting with existing clients or people that we're bringing on. It's like, hey, you know, while we chat for the next 30 or 40 minutes, I am going to take notes, you know, set the expectation.
Right. And I think it shows respect, JR, as you're talking. I'm feeling like if somebody says that to me, I feel like you're really respecting my time. Like you said, you're not going to ask me twice. You're respecting the fact that I have something meaningful to say. So obviously it's important enough for you to write down. So it's, it gives that person that value.
Exactly. I mean, how annoying is it when you're talking with somebody and you know, they say the same thing back to you that's wrong, like 2 or 3 different times. It's like, are you... Dude, you're not even listening. Like, why are we talking? Like, you're not paying attention.
Right. It's funny because it's one of my server pet peeves is when they don't write it down, which I spent many years in my youth being a server. I did waited tables probably until I was in my early 20s. I did it for years, and I never really had to write anything down. But I know that as a customer, when you're sitting there and somebody rattles off 3 things, you're like, you're not going to, you have this anxiety, they're not going to remember it. And just the act of like, even if I'm faking it, like, yeah, I got it, you know, because you have it in your head. But when it's my pet peeve, if somebody comes up and says they're going to do it and they don't write it down, it's like, oh, they're going to screw it up. I know it. It's just as simple as that. Anybody else got some suggestions for the ways that they, you know, ensure that they're doing a good job of listening?
I identified when you said you're a talker, and so sometimes you have to really concentrate on not talking. And I am really bad if I'm talking to a client, or especially a potential client, and I'm excited and I'm having ideas happening, and it is all I can do to keep my mouth shut sometimes. But I've learned that, especially like in an initial consultation with a potential client, if I just let them talk 90% of the time, I get so much more information, because a lot of times people think that they want to hire me for A, but if I just let them talk, we uncover, actually, you need to hire me for something else. And so I had to learn that over time, rather than just getting excited. But it takes a lot of effort to just stay quiet. But after time, I'm like, okay, if I can do this, I learned so much more and it benefits me and my business. So I'm getting better, but it definitely is something I've had to work at.
As a coach, it's a problem for me sometimes. And it's interesting because I have learned the art of the uncomfortable silence.
Yeah.
So sometimes if you just let them talk, and they'll run out of steam, and you just wait a minute, and that's when the really good stuff comes. It's in that minute. They're uncomfortable, you're uncomfortable, and then all of a sudden they come out with something. So I've definitely worked on that myself, trying to find that uncomfortable silence so I can get to the good stuff. So,
definitely.
Anyone else have something to share? I have a couple of other like just tactics that I have worked on, and I'll share some of those. One of the things is to mirror and clarify, and I'm sure you'll hear me do it all the time. I like to restate what I heard from you. I think it does tell the person you're talking to that I heard them, but it also allows me to kind of frame it back and go, I think I just heard this. Let me make sure I got it right. It helps the understanding on my part. So I do that quite often when I'm talking to people, say, oh, that's great. I heard you say this. This sounds like kind of mirroring back or clarifying things helps the person who's talking understand that I'm listening. And then I know we talked a lot about asking questions, and I think having good questions and open-ended questions is really helpful. I'm sure Michael has some ideas on that, on how to make sure I think about why questions instead of what and who. Like people dig deeper.
I agree. And also, I think when you're talking with somebody, it's always an easy way to say, and then what did you do? And then what happened? And why did you do this? And what happened next? And I like to using, can you tell me about that? Or can you expand upon that? Can you help me understand that a little bit more? And I think I get a little bit more in-depth conversation when I use that type of language in regard to it, because it takes them a second to think, and they go, oh, you really want to understand that. You really want to know more about that. Or sometimes I'll say, I want to know more about that. Can I know more about that? Can you educate me about that in particular? That kind of helps me.
Yeah, I know April and I have changed some of our wording to when we interview people for our YouTube channel, we ask like, tell me a story or tell me about a time when, rather than saying like, have you ever had this happen? If you say that, the answer is yes. Okay, that's not what I wanted to hear, the story. Exactly. So we have to use the right words, right? Tell me a story. Tell me about the time. And it does matter how we ask the question.
I kind of like to make it personal. That's why I like to make it personal. So it goes specifically to, can you tell me about your family? Can you tell me about tell me about your dad? Tell me about your mother. What was your favorite thing? I like terminology like that. What was your favorite thing about that with this person, or favorite thing about that incident, or whatever we were talking about when I say incident? So what was your favorite thing about that? What did you like about that? Yeah. So that kind of gets them going, oh, okay, I really, thank you for asking me that, instead of just going through the standard questions, who, what, where, when, and why.
Right. Focusing on that. What about you, Jesse? Do you have thoughts on how you ask questions? If you're doing these one-on-ones, you probably have perfected some of that.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, as a podcaster, I have, similar to Michael, I usually in advance send my guests a rough agenda of what we're going to talk about, just so they could be thinking in advance of what's going. But I warn them before we hit record. Like I said, depending on your answers, we're going to go off on tangents. The idea is that you're just what I want on my podcast is for this to sound like you're overhearing a couple people in line to go see a Bruce Springsteen show, and you're just overhearing them having a conversation. So we go off on some other areas. Sometimes it's really hard, especially when you're talking to team members. They don't open up very easily, and so I will tell them, I said, okay, we're going to do this every other week, but you do not have to wait for the scheduled meeting if you have a question or if you have something to share. And one of the things I've been telling during the summer is, and by the way, if you just need to hear a kind voice, or just need to just take a moment and hear something, a shoulder to lean on, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And you also, I think sometimes when and this is especially in business, you should worry, don't ask the question unless you really want the answer. If you're asking an employee how things are going, you have to be ready for them to go, well, to be honest, Jesse, they're going pretty crappy. And like, oh, okay, well, now let's get into why and see. And I see everyone nodding their head, because it goes back to, you really do need to care. And I think I shared you the story. My wife was an executive assistant for an owner of a company. And when people would come vent to her, she would say, okay, are you venting to your friend, or are you talking to the assistant to the owner? Because depending on which one you're wanting to do, because if you're talking to the assistant, I have to take action. If you're just venting to your friend, I can let you vent. So, and we kind of set that expectation.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And I know you did share that, Jesse. And I have a friend, actually one of my favorite colleagues in the world, Brian Collin. He started a habit with me. We would talk all the time and complain about work and other things. And he would ask me when I started talking, he would say, do you want me to fix it, or do you just want to complain, or you just want to vent? And it was just very direct, but I really loved that, because someday what he did to me is he made me think about that. When I was ranting and raving about whatever I was upset about today, I didn't really know whether I wanted him to fix it or I wanted him to listen. And I had to think about that. And then I had to own my own answer, right? If I was like, no, I want you to fix it. And then if he came back with a solution, I couldn't get mad, and the same, and vice versa, right? So he was doing a very good job of like being purposeful in his listening. And I definitely learned that technique from him, and I use it all the time. Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, one of the other things that one of my best friends does is he says, do you want me to be supportive or logical?
I love that.
I did too. Like, if supportive, absolutely, they're horrible. This decision that upper management's doing is just a horrible. You want to be logical, let's talk about it. And I love that dynamic that sometimes, which tells you how you want me to listen. Or you want me to be supportive, or you want me to be logical? And it's similar to you, right? Are you just venting, or you want me to give you an answer?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's and that's an important aspect of listening. And one of the other notes that I made about listening was judgment. And I think, Andrea, you're having all this excitement. You were talking about that when people are talking, and it's not necessarily judgment, but that's what happens to me. I'm listening, and I have a solution, or I have an idea, and I'm jumping the gun when I should be quiet and let them finish their thought, and not assuming I know the answer, and can step away from my preconceived thoughts. And, Michael was saying to ask and then, and I really love that. I'm stealing that one, Michael, to say and then more often, because it does, let them keep going, right? You're not just getting the one and then responding and answering that question. So the judgment part is it's not just judging them in a negative way, but it's making a decision, is what I'm thinking. You go into it with your own agenda and trying to go into it open, as you said, Jesse, thinking about, I'm just going to see where this goes.
I have another one that you can steal too. How do you feel about that?
Oh,
Always ask, how do you feel about that? Whatever, if they bring something up, to engage them, to dig deeper and to get more personal with the conversation and know that you are listening, is how do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
that is a good one.
Yeah, that will take it another level, right?
Yes, 100%. It seems to incite the fact that most of the people that I've done that to are engaged with that way, have kind of taken a pause for a second and went, wow, well, yeah, nobody's ever asked me that. And yeah, this is how I feel about it. And that usually incites a longer conversation.
Right. And like you said, Michael, they might not even know. I mean, I think that if that question gets asked to me, it would make me pause. Like, I don't know how I feel about it. Now you're actually asking me to think about my feelings, and also you're valuing my feelings because you're bothering to even ask the question. So there's a lot of like appreciation there happening.
100%.
That's good. Anybody else have any? There you go. Carla, you got some stuff to share.
I'm actually really glad I'm going after Michael, because it actually feeds off, my point will feed off of his. So it's funny because everything that he just said, like the and then, how does it make you feel? It's actually something that we do in preschool to encourage speech in children. And I'm like, oh yeah, we could do that with adults as well. But something that I'm in a leadership group, and it happened to me yesterday, and Michael's question of how does it make you feel is a perfect solution to it. Was somebody labeled my feelings for me. So I was complaining about something, and her response was, I hear your frustration. And I wasn't frustrated. Yeah. And it totally like threw me off. And I reread my conversation, and I was like, I wasn't frustrated. But now I'm frustrated because you've labeled my feeling and we've completely negated the point. So I think asking how did that make you feel is a much better solution to labeling that feeling. Like, because I hear that you are, and you're like, no, like you weren't listening. And it's to JR's point of you say something completely wrong and the person goes, you didn't hear me. So.
Right. I like that though. I like that you, instead of labeling it, right? Like, and that's the judgment part, like step away from what you think it is and ask the question. Like it sounds like they're frustrated, but let me ask first. Let me find out what they think they are, right?
Exactly.
That's good.
Yeah, these are all really good things. Because listening too, I think to follow up with you said, Carla, I've had people do that too, because emails especially can be so misconstrued and the feelings flare up. What I intended to say, they're misinterpreting, and then now they're taking it somewhere else. And that is something like I know I need to work on. How do you put something in writing? Because a lot of people don't want to pick up the phone, and that's frustrating.
They don't want to pick up the phone.
I know, and it's like the whole thing could have been solved with just a phone call because you might have been able to interpret correctly. Yes, JR.
No, I mean, sending off an angry email or an angry text, that is the kiss of death, because
Yeah.
it just, you can't convey facial expressions. You can't convey your tone of voice. So even something that you don't intend to be rough around the edge still is that way, just because it's written in an email and people don't get it. You know, I've both broken that cardinal rule. Yes. And then there's also been times where I'm like, you know what, let me sit on this for an hour and then let me come back to it. And my goodness, you know, what a difference it makes, because I'm like, had I clicked that send button, I could have screwed myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, somebody terrible
told me years ago, and I do it all the time, is to write the message, but don't write it in an email. Just go write the message. If you need to vent, just put it in a notepad, write it on paper, write it somewhere else. You'll usually feel differently. It's okay to write it. What's the bad thing is to hit the send button. But you get it off your chest by doing that. But oh, that's scary. But I also think it's important to think about, it's interesting you brought that up, April, about like phone calls and emails and stuff. Everybody's communication styles are different. I have some very close friends who only want to talk on the phone, and that's really hard for me sometimes because I'm busy and I'm doing things like this. And so getting on the phone for an hour is very difficult. But if, you know, we're trying to schedule lunch date or something, text is so much easier. And I think for her and I, we struggle because she's just like, we could solve the problem in 5 minutes on the phone and we have to go through 6 text messages to do it. And I'm like, yeah, but it's easier for me. So that's my style. I'm not saying it's right, but that's my style. And so learning what other people's styles are and trying to adjust your own to how they communicate, what makes them feel comfortable. It is so much easier over the phone most of the time. You're right, April, but some people don't like to do it or don't have the time to do it. And then you find that you're struggling to communicate. Yeah, I would say if you have a difficult conversation to have, the phone is always better, always, 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 or in person if you can do that. That's for sure. I know I just flashing back memories when my son was in high school with his girlfriend and they would have arguments and he would be venting to me and he's like, he's got his phone, right? He's gonna like, I'm just gonna text her. I'm like, no, put it down. And she lived just a block away. I was like, go over and talk to her face to face. You can't have that conversation over text message. It's not going to be good. All kinds of stuff will happen. So fortunately, he learned that lesson the hard way a couple times, but listening is hard. Okay, well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about, I mean, it sounds like we all have different clients and people that we talk to, and let's talk about some of the ways that we have seen other people or other businesses create opportunities to listen And again, I will share some of my own, and then that maybe spark some inspiration on your part. The first one I have is years ago, I worked for a gentleman named Mike Spalter, and I bring his name up all the time. He was a great leader. I worked at Washington Mutual Bank in IT, and Mike he was the executive director of IT, and he had 800 people or more that reported to him through the chain of command, right? So his direct reports was probably around 8 or 12, but all the way down, there was about 800 people. Mike used to do this thing called Lunch with Mike. And once a month, his admin would schedule a lunch, and she would randomly invite people to lunch. Sometimes I would say between 8 and 12 folks. And these people reported, sometimes 3 or 4 down from him. So some of them had never really talked to him very often. And I was fortunate enough to go to a few of those. And he did this style of, he'd done it for a long time, so he was a professional. So he'd order lunch in the conference room, we'd all show up, and then he'd go around the room. He'd have his paper and pen, and he'd go around the room, and everybody got to ask 2 questions or 3 questions. And he would write them all down. He wouldn't answer them. He'd just write all your questions down. He says he does this because people ask the same question, and it saves him time. He can answer everybody's question at once, and then he can pick and choose which ones are going to take more time. So he'd go around and we'd all ask our questions, and then everybody gets up, serves himself lunch, sits back down, and then Mike starts answering questions. And it was a beautiful thing. He made it very clear we could ask any question. I know I shared this with April. I have seen departments get dismantled, people lose their jobs, people get promoted, all out of that meeting. Just because he opened that door and he said, tell me what's going on in your department. Tell me what your job is like. Tell me what problems you're having. And if he didn't do that, he would never have known it. A good example of what I saw happen, there was a telecommunications department, and they, one of the team members was complaining about being on call all the time. She said, I'm on call every weekend, which means I never have a weekend to myself. And Mike came back and said, that's crazy. That should be rotated across the team. And she said, no, we all have to be on call every weekend. And I'll tell you, that did not go well with Mike. And in a few minutes, he was just, that person was in a lot of trouble, the manager who had that whole team that was on call, but he wouldn't have known that had he not opened that door. And I just wanted to talk about ways we can open that door to kind of encourage people to come to us, both clients and customers. And if there's things that you have seen other people do or that you've done that bring the communication to you, that brings the opportunity for you to listen. Anybody have any stories like that to share, something you've seen or something you're doing?
I can jump in real quick.
Okay.
I can do it from 2 perspectives. When I was in the police department, I was a sergeant, so I had a team of individuals, about 13 of them actually. So we did the same thing similar to what Mike did. Must be a common theme with Mike's. Mm-hmm. Our team would get together the best we could, because obviously some of them were working at the time, but we go into a briefing room, and it would be similar to the same thing. What's going on here? What kind of issues are you having? Do you need time off? How's the family doing? We'd ask questions for the same principle. Do you have any issues? Do you have any problems? Do you have anything that needs to be discussed? How is it working? Are you doing well with what you're doing? We'd ask the same kind of questions. I didn't do lunch like that. Sometimes we did coffee. Sometimes we went down to the coffee shop. Sometimes we went into a restaurant for a little bit, but it was difficult because of the work schedule, obviously.
Right.
But it was the same principle, and the communication level was opened enough to where, luckily I was a popular sergeant, not to be egotistical, but I was a popular sergeant because of that. Right. I remembered being underneath the sergeant. I remember not being heard, not being listened to, including, okay, I don't have enough time for my family. I don't have time. I just had kids. I just had a kid. I don't have time to spend with my kid. We didn't get that kind of communication with my sergeant because he was from old school. He was old school. Right. You just work, you do your thing. So from that perspective, I agree with that. You need to take the time to bring everybody together, ask them whether you write it down or whether or not you have them email you. If they don't want to feel pressured, they can email you in advance and say, yes, this is what I want to talk about in the meeting. This is what I'm worried about. This is the issue that I'm having. These are the things that I think need to be addressed, kind of a situation from that perspective. As a podcaster, it's easier for me because I engage through social media. So when I want to talk to somebody or I want to bring on guests, I usually post it within social media and I say, these are the topics that I'm discussing in this week. If you would like to be a guest, then please, direct message me. I've got a thing on my website where you can literally press a microphone and leave a voicemail. So you can text me. I've got a separate line that you can text me on, so that I've enabled several different media forms, whether it be through social media, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, that you can contact me through voicemail, so that it bypasses the telephone completely. You can go right on the computer and do it. You can email me, or you can text me. So from that regard, I can engage with my audience and the people that I'm bringing on as guests as well, and say, what did you like about that episode? What didn't you like about that episode? Tell me what I can do better for the next time we talk about this particular subject.
Right.
What would you like to hear? What would you like to learn? What inspires you? What motivates you? And it allows the communication avenues from several different perspectives to open up. So email, text,
Right.
message, or phone.
Right.
And that's helped me.
Yeah, it does. I mean, you've opened up a lot of ways, and I like the idea of leaving a voice message, even instead of an email, being able to kind of record yourself, because some people are not really good at, articulating that in written form, but they can express themselves verbally a lot easier. So that's a really wonderful way of making it easier for people to share with you what their thoughts are. Carla, you were going to speak too. You had some ideas.
Oh yeah. So I used to be the supervisor of a child care center, and what we did was we had to do monthly staff meetings. And in our staff room, I just had a list of what do you want to talk about at the next staff meeting. And every time somebody was in the staff room, or if something had happened, like a pain point, they would write it down. And then with my clients, and my clients range from 4-year-olds to their parents who are in their 50s and 60s. And I will ask, what is the goal? So what are the parents' goals for their children? And then I ask the children, what's your goal? Like, what do you want to learn? Because more often than not, the kids actually do have answers to those questions for themselves. They know what they need better. And it's about figuring out those pain points so that you are listening and responding to their goal, not what you think the goal should be.
Right. I love that you have kind of a place for people to write it down, because then it's when it happens in their head. Because I think one of the things about being open into listening is we can only listen when we're present, but you've created a way where you don't have to be present, and it comes to mind and they can just scribble it on on the board, and you can catch it later. Right. It's like a suggestion box, but it's a little more out there, which probably spurs other people to think about it. Me too. I want to talk about that too, right?
Well, and it's amazing how some people will write it out of emotion. So like something will have happened and they've written it down, but then it's still 3 weeks till the staff meeting, and you'll find that sometimes they'll go and they'll scratch it out because it's no longer important. But it's a way for them to know that they have a platform to be heard on, which I think it's just a great strategy.
It is. I love it. I love that idea. JR, did you have an idea? Somebody else said, I thought.
Nope, not me on this one.
Okay.
You know what? It makes me think. It makes me think. I don't know if my latest television obsession is Ted Lasso, and if you have not watched it, it's on Apple TV. It's absolutely fabulous. But in one of the earlier episodes, they have a suggestion box. There are 2 American coaches that are coaching a European soccer team, and he actually takes what the players put in the suggestion box and made it work. Like he fixed the shower pressure was one of the complaints, and it makes for a very funny scene, but it also sent the message of, when you're starting with a new team, listen to the team. What are you doing? When I started this about 1.5 years ago with this company, I met with everyone and I asked, what do you like about the job? What do you dislike about the job? What do you want from this role as a director? What do you think we can do better? And then give me what your favorite song on a road trip is, because, and I made a playlist, because, you know, that way I made a Spotify playlist of everyone's suggestions of road trip songs. So, and I was able to take that information and then help plot what I wanted to do as a new leader. And I know we just keep saying this over and over again, but the reality is listening is more than waiting for your turn to talk, and just truly wanting to, you care about what the other person is saying. And and I think that's the main thing that we all are focused on, is if you want to listen, you really need to listen, make it active, and then do something with the information you receive.
Yeah, and I like that you said that, Jesse, because I think the fact that, you know, you were talking about the surveys and they fix the shower, it is do something with it, whether it is, as I said earlier, like mirroring it back and saying I heard you and I got that, but also I know one of the gentlemen, Travis, that I interviewed, he said you know, he would bring it up later. He would ask the question like, what are you doing, what's going on, and they talk about their personal life. Then when he talks to them the next time, he would say, how did that go, you know, and even if you have to keep that in your notes, right, so you can ask that question, it shows that you respect them as a human being and that you actually care about what they're doing. I do think doing something with it really is an important part of listening. Go ahead, JR.
Yeah, well, Jesse, you jogged my thought process, and also Cindy, your former manager at Washington Mutual. It is important to you know, to get that feedback, especially in a situation where you have like employees or you're representing the company in some respect. I think as an extension, it's also important to create a realistic expectation, or you know, realistically tell people, hey, you know, look, I hear that your concerns are A, B, and C. A, I got you. B, probably. C, there's just nothing we can do. And I think one of the fallbacks or drawbacks that maybe I certainly have to check myself of wanting to give everybody the world, right? And that's not realistic. So perhaps setting realistic expectations, I don't know what other word to use, is another really important part of clear, honest communication. Because if I'm an employee and I come to you, Jesse, and say, hey man, here's what I don't like, I'd really like to fix this. And Jesse, you reply back to me, sounds great, we'll work on that. And you have zero intention of ever doing anything about it. Well, now I'm going to be like, well, damn, he really doesn't care, does he? And this place sucks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas as an employee, if I come to you and say, Cindy, you know, here's my concern, I really don't like this, and you'd be like, yeah, JR, you know, we've gotten that from a couple staff. For right now, there's just nothing we can do. You know, the company is doing what it's doing, and this is the way forward. And I'm sorry that rubs you wrong, but there's just, on that one, there's nothing I can do. And as an employee, I'd be like, okay, you know, that stinks, but at least she was cool about it, right? I got it off my chest. Now I know what the score is, and let's just keep moving forward with it. You know,
the other thing I do, and I think that's a great point, JR, is I will say, and understand, just because I don't take your suggestion doesn't mean I wasn't listening. There are things I may know that you do not know, and there's other factors going on. So often I think you're perfect setting that expectation, because you didn't listen to me because I told you this was a problem and you didn't fix it. No, I heard you, but your suggestion on how to fix that was impractical or whatever it was. So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, you're both reminding me again, at Washington Mutual, working there, I had a staff member, Jeannie. She came to me she didn't like an approach we were taking on a project. She's like, this is all wrong. What you're doing is crazy. Don't do this. And her and I had a disagreement on that. I said, well, you know, I don't agree with you. And she was very frustrated. And then I think later she called and said, well, I just won't tell you if you know, you don't listen to me, you don't. And I said, it's not about that. I heard you. Somebody has to make the decision. I'm the leader in this position. I'm making the decision, but please continue to tell me when you think I'm wrong. And please continue to tell me when you don't like it. I want to hear it. Doesn't mean that I won't always not do it. Sometimes I will, sometimes I won't, right, Jesse? That's just you. Sometimes you can, sometimes it doesn't work, but you want to make sure that when you can't answer them, JR, right? When you can't give them the answer they want, that they understand that, you know, there's an intent to care and listen and hear, right? And please keep bringing it to me.
There's times it's just not going to work, you know?
Right.
I'm sorry. Right. I wish I could help, but on this thing, there's just nothing we can do. It has to be this way. Okay, cool. You know, maybe next time.
Maybe next time. Anyone else? Yeah, I have that. When I don't know if it was Jesse that was talking, I was also thinking about just do one thing. Like if you can only do one thing that helps them when you're talking to them, or if you have a whole team of people and they give you 20 suggestions, pick one, even the easiest one that you can do, because showing that you mean it, right? Showing that you're listening really matters to people, and the whole team or the rest of the folks will go, oh, they, you know, gave some feedback and then they made a change, and maybe it wasn't my suggestion but somebody's suggestion, and so that kind of fosters that continuing of, you know, airing their grievances or sharing their ideas. You know, it shows that you're listening. Okay, well, we're almost out of time. I have thousands more, but we only do an hour here. And so I do want to just share, as I said before, I do a list of books, and I'm just going to put them up here. I'll send this to you, everyone. There's a couple here that I think are fantastic. Obviously, The Power of Listening is great. The other one, both Listen Up and You're Not Listening are also really good. But the Crucial Conversations is a bit of a different topic. Wait a minute, am I not sharing my screen? I'm not. I hit share and it didn't. I just didn't do it again. Here we go. I hit the last button. There we go. So the You're Not Listening and Listen Up are both really good books on the topic, as well as Power of Listening, but Crucial Conversations a little different topic, but I felt it kind of went along with what we're talking about here. I don't know if anybody's read that series. There's actually, I think there's 3 books in that series, like Crucial Conversations, Crucial Confrontations, like they go all into that. And the book is fantastic, sharing you with tools on how to have difficult conversations with staff members and employees, as well as how to have confrontations with people when you know you have to confront somebody. And I know it's this book that really honed in for me, and I think JR had mentioned it, about having the purpose of your conversation in the frame and knowing what you're trying to get out of it. Because especially when you're in that difficult place, it really helps if you ask yourself, what am I trying to do here? What do I really want? Not just vent, but like, what do I really want? So you can message your communication that way. So I'll share these with you. That's just some of my thoughts. And then the last is the next set of these events. So in August, we're talking about focus and staying productive through the day. Another thing that sometimes, you know, talkers and those who have shiny object problems, I have trouble with that. In September, we'll talk about tribes, sort of building your like-minded group of people, which you guys are becoming more and more for me. So thank you for all of those who keep coming back. In October, we'll talk about branding, specifically personal branding, but we can talk about that as a topic. November is storytelling, and December is habits. So I'll keep you all on the list so you can choose to pick and choose which ones you want to come to. I hope you can come to some of them with us, and I'll send that out too. But that's it. Look at that, 1 minute tell. Anybody have a last topic on listening or anything they want to share before we close out?
I just want to say thank you, everybody here, for listening and allowing me to listen to what you had to say and to share.
Thank you, Michael. I am so blessed to have all of you here, and I learned so much today from everybody. Wonderful. I think April, we lost her. And I see that Alyssa joined. So hi, Alyssa. I'm so glad you're here. I know you're just listening in. Okay, well then I'll let you guys all go back to your evening and your lovely weather, wherever that is in the world. And we will, oh, hi, there you are. And we'll talk next month. So thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate your time, guys.
Bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
Cindy. Sorry I couldn't be
Bye.
here
Thank you
sooner.
so
Thanks,
much.
guys.
No problem. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jesse. Thanks, Michael.
Keep up the great work.
Yep. Thanks, Alice. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you.